The movie begins with a captivating scene of 4 astronauts on a mission, meticulously collecting geological samples from the surface of Mars, just outside their spacecraft. Inside the spaceship, their colleagues, who are closely monitoring the situation, detect an approaching storm, one that is significantly more severe than they had initially predicted. They urgently advise the astronauts outside to return to the safety of the ship. A tense discussion arises among the crew about the most appropriate course of action. Should they attempt to withstand the storm on Mars, or should they abort the mission and launch their ship back into space? The majority are inclined to take the risk and stay on Mars, but the commander, exercising her authority, makes the final decision. They must evacuate the planet. As they hastily prepare for departure, the storm intensifies. The crew rushes to repair the damage, their efforts hindered by the deteriorating weather conditions. Amid this chaos, Mark, one of the astronauts, is hit by a piece of flying debris. The impact damages his communication equipment, cutting off his contact with the rest of the team. The storm continues to escalate, and the crew inside the ship warn that the spacecraft won't be able to withstand the violent winds much longer. They need to launch immediately. The commander orders her crew to retreat to the safety of the ship, but she remains outside, determined to find Mark. Despite her best efforts, she is eventually forced to abandon her search to ensure the survival of the rest of her team. The crew is overwhelmed with a deep sense of loss for their fallen comrade, Mark. The narrative continues with the director of NASA addressing the nation in a press conference. He announces the successful completion of their Mars mission and the safe return journey of the team. However, he also shares the unfortunate news of the loss of 1 astronaut during the mission. Meanwhile, on Mars, Mark regains consciousness, finding himself half buried in Martian sand. His suit is flashing multiple warning signals, indicating critical levels of oxygen and alarming blood pressure readings. As he struggles to his feet, with great effort, Mark navigates his way back to the base station. Once inside, he performs a self-surgery, removing the debris lodged in his abdomen and using staples to close the wound. He then activates a video log and begins to document his ordeal. He explains how the debris not only disrupted his communication systems, but also inadvertently sealed his suit, saving his life. Mark expresses no resentment towards his crew for leaving him behind, acknowledging that they had every reason to believe he was dead. He contemplates the harsh reality that it will be at least 4 years before NASA can launch another manned mission to Mars, and he will run out of food long before then. In a poignant moment, Mark walks around the base, looking at the personal belongings his crew left behind. He carefully puts some of these items away, a silent tribute to his departed comrades. He then takes stock of the food supplies at the base, meticulously logging the quantity. He realizes that he only has enough food to last him a year, and he will need to devise a way to cultivate enough food to sustain him for 3 more years. In a stroke of luck, he takes some potatoes that the crew had brought for their Thanksgiving meal and decides to grow them on Mars. He embarks on a series of tasks, cleaning the solar panels to ensure maximum energy efficiency, hauling loads of Martian soil inside the habitat, and even repurposing the crew's waste to create a makeshift fertilizer. With the groundwork laid, he tills the soil within the habitat and plants the potatoes. However, he soon encounters a critical problem. He does not have enough water to properly irrigate the crops. Undeterred, Mark sets about devising a solution to generate more water. He constructs a device that creates water through a series of small chemical reactions, effectively creating a sustainable water source. After a few days of operation, the interior walls of the habitat are coated with condensation, and the potato plants begin to sprout. Meanwhile, back on Earth, NASA holds a solemn funeral for Mark, mourning the loss of an astronaut they believe to have died on Mars. Vincent, a high-ranking official at NASA, proposes to the director the idea of returning to Mars to retrieve the equipment left behind by Mark's crew. However, the director dismisses the idea, citing the need for transparency with the public and his reluctance to broadcast the recovery of Mark's body. Vincent counters, pointing out that Mark's body will remain preserved on Mars due to the planet's conditions. He suggests framing the mission as a noble endeavor to recover Mark's body for his family. In the midst of these discussions, Mindy, a satellite supervisor at NASA, receives coordinates that direct her attention to Mark's location on on Mars, she notices movement at the base, which prompts her to place an urgent call to the director. The footage from the satellite is undeniable proof that Mark is still alive. Faced with this revelation, NASA grapples with the dilemma of what to tell the public, especially since they are required to release the footage within 24 hours. They are concerned about potential backlash for having left an astronaut behind. After much deliberation, they decide to hold a press conference to assure the public that they will do everything within their power to bring Mark back home alive. On the desolate Martian landscape, Mark, the stranded astronaut, meticulously studies maps at the base station. He is trying to determine his location relative to the landing site of the next Mars mission, which is scheduled to arrive in 4 years. The destination is approximately 3,200 kilometers away, a daunting distance considering his rover's limited range of 35 kilometers per journey. Furthermore, it would take him around 50 days to reach the destination from the base, even with continuous travel. Undeterred by these challenges, Mark sets about modifying the rover to extend its range without the need for frequent recharging at the base. His efforts pay off as he successfully doubles the battery life of the rover. However, this achievement comes at a cost. He has to disable the rover's heating system. Given the extreme cold on Mars, surviving the journey without heat is impossible. To overcome this, Mark decides to excavate some radioactive material and store it in the back of the rover to provide warmth. Meanwhile, back on Earth, NASA holds another press conference. They inform the public that they have been tracking Mark's movements via their satellites and have deduced his objective: to rendezvous with the next Mars mission upon its arrival. In response to this revelation, they expedite the estimated completion time of the next Mars mission from 4 years to 9 months, hoping to reach Mark before any further mishaps occur. NASA makes a strategic decision not to inform Mark's crew about his survival, fearing it might distract them during their ongoing journey back to Earth. Meanwhile, on Mars, Mark harvests a substantial yield of 400 potatoes from his indoor garden. He replants the smaller ones for future growth and sets aside the larger ones for consumption. In a fortunate turn of events, he locates the Pathfinder, a rover that was lost on Mars several years ago. He manages to establish communication with NASA using the Pathfinder, which has a replica back on Earth. Although NASA's control over the Pathfinder is limited to moving its camera, Mark ingeniously sets up a communication system using hexadecimal codes, enabling him to ask more complex questions beyond simple yes or no. NASA uses the Pathfinder to provide Mark with instructions on how to hack into the rover and establish a direct communication link with NASA. Vincent, a NASA official, informs Mark about their rescue plan, bringing a wave of relief to the isolated astronaut. Mark is eager to know his crew's reaction upon learning of his survival, but Vincent confesses that the crew is still unaware of his situation. This revelation infuriates Mark, leading Vincent to realize that they must inform the crew about Mark's survival. In a surprising development, Mark's former crew members receive communications from NASA during their routine mail check. The messages reveal the astonishing news that Mark is still alive and that a rescue mission is underway. Mark, on his part, calculates his food supplies. He finds that with the remaining food at the base and the potatoes he has cultivated, he has just enough to sustain him until NASA can send a rescue mission. However, disaster strikes while Mark is tending to his garden. The entrance chamber of the habitat explodes, causing him injuries and cracking his helmet. Thinking quickly, he uses duct tape to seal the crack, restoring his oxygen supply. Upon returning to his garden, he discovers that the exposure to Mars's harsh atmosphere has killed all his plants and destroyed the watering system he had set up. Mark communicates the unfortunate incident to NASA, who realize the gravity of the situation. If they do not expedite their rescue mission, Mark will run out of food before they can reach him. In light of these developments, NASA grants permission to Mark's old crew to establish contact with him. The crew members reconnect, engaging in friendly banter and catching up on lost time. Meanwhile, Mark begins the arduous task of cleaning up the area of the base he had designated for potato cultivation. He removes all the tarp and dirt and reseals the hole where the hatch had been. Back on Earth, NASA makes a critical decision to skip inspections on the ship they plan to use for Mark's rescue. They reason that the ship is likely in good condition, and the inspection would only consume precious time. The focus now is on speeding up the rescue mission to ensure Mark's survival. However, upon launch, the ship explodes, reducing all their hard work to ashes. The catastrophic failure of the launch is observed by China's Space Division, who offer their assistance. With the help of Rich, a physicist, NASA is able to devise a more efficient plan to rescue Mark. The plan involves the Hermes, the ship that Mark's crew is on, swinging back into Earth's orbit long enough to be sent a fresh supply of food, then shooting back into space to pick up Mark without landing. The only problem with the plan is that it will add 500 days to the Hermes' travel time. NASA's director vetoes the plan, explaining that he doesn't want to risk the lives of everyone on board the Hermes to save Mark. Another NASA coordinator thinks this is unfair and sends the plan details to the Hermes in secret. Mark's crew discusses the plan amongst themselves, realizing that if they follow through with it, they will be committing mutiny. The crew members deliberate whether they want to spend an additional 500 days in space, away from their families. However, they ultimately decide that rescuing Mark is the right thing to do. They unanimously vote to return for Mark. Each crew member contacts their families to inform them that they will be away longer than initially planned. NASA is notified that the Hermes has deviated from its plotted course, and the director reprimands the coordinator for secretly sending the rescue plans to the crew. For the plan to work, Mark needs to gather all the equipment that is keeping him alive, including the machines providing him with heat and oxygen, and transport them to the ship in time to rendezvous with the Hermes as it passes Mars. The Hermes swings by Earth, picks up supplies, and uses the gravitational pull of Earth's atmosphere to gain momentum and launch back towards Mars without using much fuel. After a grueling 7-month period, Mark begins his preparations to rendezvous with the Hermes. He also takes along the solar panels, enabling him to recharge the rover intermittently. NASA, analyzing the situation, concludes that Mark's ship will need to attain high speeds to meet up with the Hermes. Consequently, they instruct Mark to discard all unnecessary equipment. He removes supplies intended for a 6-person crew, retaining only what is essential for a solo journey. He is also directed to strip off the front and sides of the ship and replace them with tarp to reduce weight, and to remove all control panels, since the Hermes will be remotely operating his ship. Mark exits the rover for the final time and boards the ship to prepare for the journey. He shaves off the beard he has grown, dons fresh clothes and a spacesuit, and awaits further instructions from his crew. They reassure him and caution him that he might lose consciousness due to the force of the launch. As Mark's ship takes off, the tarps are immediately sucked into space. Mark loses consciousness and is unable to communicate his status to his crew. Upon regaining consciousness, he is informed by his crew that they won't be able to get their ship close enough to his. The commander instructs a crew member to construct an explosive and attach it to the rear of the ship to decelerate it, thereby increasing their chances of reaching Mark. They detonate the explosive and manage to get within sight of Mark's ship, but not close enough to reach him. The commander dons a spacesuit, straps herself into a chair on the exterior of the ship, tethers it with a length of rope, and ventures towards Mark. However, the cable isn't long enough, so Mark cuts a hole in his suit and uses the escaping air pressure to propel himself towards the commander. She catches him, reels him in, and they return inside to reunite with the rest of the crew. They inform NASA that they have retrieved Mark and are en route home. Several years later, back on Earth, Mark is imparting lessons about safety and preparedness in space to NASA, initiates the Ares 4 launches, and the crew members of the Hermes, along with their loved ones, watch the launch on television. Thus concludes an extraordinary tale of survival and resilience.